Welcome. This video will be an intervallo of sorts where I sit down and speak for an extended period of time about the attack portion of the winger's responsibilities. I have a couple things that I'm working on, but in the meantime, I wanted to get this video out for the new players who are looking for something to help them improve, or anyone curious about the winger, how to play it, and specifically my mentality and how I like to approach winger as an offensive role. Now, I'll be using some old clips, but I'm going to be using these intentionally because I think as a newer player, I can both analyze them with the experience I've now gained and also point out common mistakes you may be making as you improve in your Tron journey. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, starting off with this first clip, I'm going to talk about the standard winger grind, your options for going in a standard winger grind, and as well as a common mistake I see a couple new players doing, which and options to fix it. So let's get into it. Here we have a standard winger grind, nothing too special. Double in, double out. I do want to pause it very quickly here and just note this is 2 inputs in, whatever your keybinds are, 2 inputs in. You can do these at the same time, and then 2 inputs in the other direction as well. This is called a double. They're done relatively same time. I want to make sure that when you do this grind, these inputs either need to be very, very close together or at the same time. The reason you may not want to do them at the same time is because to play at an advanced level, you typically want to roll your binds and have full control over your cycle, as the game can actually queue up multiple key presses. So for example, if you try pressing 5 keys at once, you will see that even if you lift your hands off of the fingers, those key presses will still go through. And because of that, at the higher level, I've seen other pro players tend to recommend turning only when your cycle can turn, which means pressing them twice at the same time essentially locks you into the movement and makes it harder to be more precise and more reactive. But for now, pressing whatever your right or left keybinds at the same time works as a completely new player. And eventually you can get used to rolling them, but that's the general grind which I wanted to just note. Now when you head up, you ideally want to wait for your sweepers to split and then turn out. And then now you will be essentially heading parallel to your enemy winger. Now, there's a couple things you can do once you hit the end here. I am going to first point out this mistake and talk about it, and then I'm going to come back to this and talk about the different reactions and things you can do at the end of the wall here as a winger. So, firstly, this is the first big mistake. Now, you see, we were initially heading parallel as wingers. I was slightly ahead, but I was not far enough ahead that I could turn and cut the enemy winger off, which would be very, very bad, and that's almost like an instant collapse of the enemy defense. The sweepers can react to that. They can still set it up, but it becomes very, very hard to them if the wingers let through even earlier. But this is almost as bad, and you'll see why very shortly. But you definitely, as a winger, as a new player, you want to ride this all the way out to the wall. I'll have another clip, the second clip later, which I'll pull up and show you why and the reason that this works. But because this enemy winger chose to turn in early instead and head this way, I was able to make one turn, right? Turn in and retain most of my speed. If you'll notice, I'm still sitting at like 38 speed, which is about 7 above the standard speed. And that is still very, very fast. And you'll see that as well. The reason you don't want to do this is because I will come in, I will turn, and I will grind this wall, and I will gain a ton of speed. Now, if you notice up here, the wingers the sweepers have not even set up their defense yet. And I'll just let the clip play out as I explain the rest of this happening. I turn, I grind the wall, but you'll notice our center has also center attacked. This means that the sweepers have to deal with the center attack and me, the winger, being let by extremely early into the game. And you'll see that they simply cannot manage both threats at once, and the entire defense ends up collapsing. Now, there are definitely a couple things I could have done a little bit better here. I'll hop back here for a second. Right here. Just a little bit before. So as I'm coming in here, you can see the defender, in this case, is taking is essentially heading in this direction, right? They're going to be caught up in this area. So since I've decided to head this way and give my teammate a bit of space, what I can do is come up close, dive into this crevice, and make it as hard as possible for the defender to expand or get any space if he does decide to turn back, right? You'll see that past me doesn't do this because they weren't as confident in their binding skills, and that's perfectly okay, but just recognize that I'm leaving a lot of space here for the enemy defender to work with when they come back around a second time. And if you want to improve your game and get to the next level, this is one of the things you can do. Just make it harder and not leave as much space open for other people to use. Or leave the space open, but leave it for yourself with a plan in mind. But if you're new or new on the newer side, just making sure you live and stay in the zone is absolutely okay, and it is 100% the best thing you can do for your team. So, as you see here, I'm going to just take up as much of the zone as possible, wait for my teammates to push up, and you'll see here I end up tracing the area I've gotten, and we end up winning because one of the teammates ended up coming over, and we had more people in the zone than the enemy team. And that's a very, very good example of why you do not want to let the enemy winger through to your side a little bit earlier. Or too early. Now, if we jump back to this moment. Okay, so you might be asking, what can you do as the winger when you end up heading to the wall like this? And assuming you should be the same speed if the grind is going well and you're doing the grind correctly, and even if you're not, and you're not getting the maximum speed out of the grind as possible, you should at least be even or maybe just slightly behind the enemy winger, right? So when you get to the wall, it's very likely, unless the enemy winger does something different, the enemy winger is going to meet you here. If they don't, then again, take advantage of it. If they do not meet up to the wall, you can simply turn and then ride their wall and then use it to head in the direction of the zone, right? The enemy zone. However, if they do decide to meet you up as is standard and they're at the wall here, there's two things you can do. You can go up and turn inwards, do a triple, and then head back inside. This is pretty common, except usually Usually, I'd recommend stabbing the wall and then doing a triple back. However, if the server is laggy or you don't feel comfortable using rubber, leaving a little bit of a gap between the wall and not stabbing it is absolutely okay. And there's a couple options for the enemy winger as well. What they might do, they might triple in a little earlier so they can get ahead of you, but they're trading off by leaving a little gap there, which you can use. Up to you whether you go past it or try to continue fighting them on the inside. Do note that some enemy wingers are aggressive, and if they do a similar strategy to this where they don't go all the way and they turn in and you turn in as well, like so, they could try to use their speed to come over and cut you or duel you out of this space. And if you stab the wall especially, this is very, very deadly. If you and them have stabbed their wall and they are somehow coming in front of you. There are times the center does this as well. The center can help the winger by just constricting your space. And in that case, instead of turning in, you can then go ahead and stab the wall, but ride your line on the outside. Now, this is tough because, let me see if I can get a better angle. Frequently, the enemy center is going to be right here. Or usually, if they're not spending too much time, they can even be there. And that's where they'll, like, you know, cut you off and do some shenanigans if they're closer to you and riding your direction. But the reason why heading back on the inside is a little tough is because when you're heading on the inside, you want to make it over to their zone, assuming that none of your teammates have died. When you turn back on the inside, you have basically committed yourself to a more defensive posture. Now, ideally, you want to be riding walls. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm just going to throw this in here. When you are next to a wall, you gain speed off of it. So, especially in these early moments during the grind, you want to be using your past walls that you've created to gather speed and use that speed to get places extremely fast and cut other people off. But the reason why turning inside is not the best idea is because almost always the center will be there and they will be able to cut you off here. And essentially what will happen is you'll be here and most of the time you'll be able to make it to about here, but you will be committed to a defensive position and the sweepers over here the enemy sweepers get plenty of time to set up. So it is a very defensive move, but I do want to note it because if you are dying constantly, you can use this maneuver to either, and I do want to note this, like stabbing this box right here on that wall is especially effective at locking the center and enemy winger in this zone right here. And it makes it very hard for them to get past. So it's very good to play defensive if you feel like your defense or sweepers constantly getting pressured very early, hammered on, and you don't feel like you can do anything. You can turn back out instead, ride the wall, and cut them off by the box. Now, if the enemy center is getting there before you do, that's when you typically want to just head in that direction, which is standard. Go on the attack, rely on your sweepers, right? Put pressure on the enemy defense so all of these sweepers can't just run on over to your side. That's the general premise of what you can do as a winger during the first 10 to 15 seconds of a game in a grind. Those are turning in, turning out. Those are the two most common things. There's also stabbing the wall and riding it out, which is also something you can do, though this is very risky and you usually only a mix-up. I usually only use it as a mix-up. If you're good at stabbing, you can throw it in more often. If you can constantly get that like 4.5, 4.7 rubber without killing yourself, then you can go for it. And that basically lets you get past very early, even if the enemy player stabs the wall. So those are basically the three main variations. If you do decide to turn in like this, just note that you're probably going to get some variation of both of you heading in here, and then your exit is going to be somewhere in the center here, typically. Or if you end up getting dueled out, you might turn back and then end up coming around this way instead. But that's outside the scope of this video. Alright, in this clip, I'm going to show you a similar mistake. I'm going to explain a couple of mistakes past me made here, and I'm also going to talk about the concepts of pressure and what do you do as a winger on the attack. How do you pressure the defense? How do you make the enemy to make mistakes? What are your goals and what are your plans? Alright, so here we have the grind that I've talked about before, where you turn out. And here you notice that immediately the enemy winger did not take me to the wall, all the way to the wall, and left a gap for me. However, if you also notice, past me reacted a bit late. So I turned in and I did not immediately notice this hole. So I rode here, I had to turn, and then turn again. And this basically made me quite slow because I had to burn a lot of turns on this. And at the same time, wasted a bit of time because all this time spent turning could have instead... let me see if I can approximate this. So that's about the amount of time spent turning. That would be the amount of time which I'd had to use anyway to travel that far. So I could have made it approximately that much farther if I noticed and reacted immediately. However, it's still worthwhile to note that this indeed was actually a lot closer to the wall than the previous example. So this was not nearly as egregious of an example as well, and this is relatively fine to do. And I'll just let the clip play out, and then I'll speak a little bit more. You'll notice that there's no center attack here, so there's nothing for the sweepers to panic about. And you'll be able to see how, even though I did manage to get past super fast and put the pressure on early, and you will notice that even though I managed to get past fast and put the pressure on super early, the sweepers are able to properly set up their boxes and everything is fine for them at the time being, like at this instant right now. Now, I do want to head back here and just use this example to talk about the example of trading pressure. Now, typically, when you let the enemy winger pass like this, you want to do so with intent and you want to be able to get something from it. For example, if I were to come out here, also notice how they turn back in on the outside, which means they have to ride their entire tail back all the way to the end. And even then, my friendly center is there to make their life difficult. So they're not going to get to our side anytime soon. Assuming they turn back inside, and this was more of a calculated gambit, there is a strategy that you can do called a slingshot, where if your friendly center, let's just say their enemy center and this enemy winger decided to coordinate a slingshot, how would that look like? Well, this enemy center would come up here and they would grind this wall. Do note that this turning can be earlier. In fact, it's actually better for it to be... Let me see if I can draw that a bit better. So, right there. And then they just grind this wall all the way out. And now this center, once they turn back in on the inside, grinds down here, takes a left, and heads into this into this tunnel created by the center. Then the center doubles back using a very similar set of keybinds, similar keybinds we've seen during the grind, and also heads this way. Now what this does is that you'll notice that typically the winger will have to give up some amount of space on the edge here, and that would let me, the enemy winger, get past. Or the friendly winger in this case. But what this will do is, because I'm getting past, they can speed up and put an immense amount of pressure on our own defense as they gain a lot of speed riding in this tunnel with each other. And this puts a ton of pressure on our zone, but they've traded that for some pressure that I can put on their zone. And so Fortress is a game mode about these trades. What can I get out of the enemy team while costing the least to myself? So in this case, this is a very, very, very good trade for me, because I have gotten through and they are going to be stuck in the center, not pressuring our zone for about the next 15 seconds. And this is phenomenal, because I will now have direct access to pressure them in the next 10 seconds or so, while they won't. So this is an example of an unequal trade, and you want to be looking for these constantly. Granted, in the match, as a new player, you don't have to worry about too much analyzing it. It's much more important to learn the basics of binding and getting more comfortable with the game. But in terms of higher strategy, this is what I'm looking for as I'm deciding and weighing different actions of what to do. I do want to note that typically, as you have more coordination, the amount of value you can get is higher from your decisions. So for example, in the slingshot example, because you have two people on a coordinated attack, no matter what I as a solo winger can do, I will always feel like I'm losing value just because you have two people coordinated on the same page, which is doing something. And it is very, very hard to defend against that, which is why holing is so important. And you'll see a lot of other common Fortress strategies which require coordination, which are very, very good, but you won't see them in common pickup matches. Now, I do want to note there are a couple times as well where this is absolutely not okay, where you want to defend the enemy winger getting by you at all costs. One of these examples is if the center has center attacked. So if they've rode down the center and they've lived, or they've successfully broken your defense, or let's say they've center attacked but they've died, that your sweepers are going to be tied up here in the center trying to defend any attacks from coming in through the center. That means if you let an enemy winger come through, they will not be able to get back here in time. Or if they do, what the winger can do is simply shift to the center and then attack that way. It is basically a lose-lose situation. So in that case, you very badly do not want to let the enemy winger through. And if need be, you can turn back like this and just ride them to the wall, right? That's probably not going to happen, but something like this, right? You are, again, committing to a defensive posture if you do so, but it will help your defense from entirely collapsing. So that's huge. Very similarly, if one of your teammates dies, you might want to consider this as well, right? You might want to consider not letting the enemy winger through as fast as possible. just because your sweepers and defense need time to set up and adjust to a person dying. Now, there is a counter argument to be made for instead going on the attack once one of your people died, but it's a very situational, because the reason why you want to pressure the other team, whatever team you're on, is because if this enemy sweepers see that they have a numbers advantage and no one's pressuring them, they can head on over. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want them to coordinate, harass, and outnumber you on your own defense, which is shaky. So, again, a game of trades. Are the sweepers staying back? Are they coming up, right? What is more important? What can you do as a player based on how the game evolves? Now, usually I'd recommend a player down probably playing more defensive, at least initially, but that is just my leaning. I know other players who would go, you want to attack to prevent the enemy sweepers from leaving. So those are basically your two options. Now, I'm going to play the rest of the clip, and I'm going to speak about specifically the sweeps and what to do about the sweeps, what I'm doing here, what I'm looking at. So, right here is the first example of a technique you can do as a winger. As you notice, I'm on the side. Let me let play a little bit more. And right here, you'll notice that the enemy sweeper has stabbed the wall out and is now forming their box. But if you take a look at the other enemy sweeper right here, they have left a gap. They have taken their line back out. They have not stabbed the wall here. So noticing this, one thing Past Me could have done, I'm going to rewind here a little bit just because I want to get a better angle of it. Right around here, for example. And this is something I'll mention later, but Past Me's positioning is not great. Not too great here. And I'll note it when it's more egregious later. But there's a tactic you can do where you stab under here and ride the wall. And then what I would consider is contesting all of this area, which is basically been left for free if you stab underneath the wall here. Now, considering this is Crinkle, they're probably not going to be caught unaware. And if you stab the wall like this, they may choose to turn out or just stab you out and change their plan. They may choose to ride the wall, turn back, and then realize, oh, wow, wait, there's someone here. Let me create some space for myself and then stab you out or duel you out here. And there's a variety of ways to manage this. But if you're against someone who's newer or potentially not as aware or just not paying attention, stabbing against the wall and riding it out and contesting this Sweepbox is one way you can immediately get a nice attack. Now, some moments of caution. This is incredibly risky. The defender, if they're not riding inside their line or if they're on the edge of the line, can stab you out, and you need to be prepared in that case to live in this very small zone, which is, again, very, very risky. However, if the defender is past you or not around, like they wouldn't be in this case, like the defender would be around here if I were to go for a stab right now. So if that's not an issue, there's also the issue of the sweepers who could try keep you locked back here and dump you. So you've got to, it's a very, very risky maneuver, but it is something that can absolutely be done. Now, I'm talking a lot about the Sweepbox. Let me forward it up a little bit here. What is the Sweepbox? So maybe a little bit back. I want to get a good angle here. All right, so the sweeper's goal essentially is to form something called a Sweepbox. Now, in an ideal world, it'll look something like this. You have one box on one side, and then you have another box on another side. And this is a very rough drawing, but the general idea is that they meet here in the middle, and they are sealed. So, let me see if I can redraw this a little bit better. There we go. This is the essence of the ideal thing that the sweepers want to set up. What this does is that it keeps the attackers. There is some space on the back wall they can use here if they stab under, but that's why you typically want to stab the back wall out, so that they have a hard time living here or getting here. But attackers can't really use this space unless they get multiple people back there, which is why it's not really something which is too important. Which is why also giving up the back wall as a sweeper is not too detrimental, but that goes outside into sweeper territory. The goal of the sweepers is to keep the attackers on the outside. So basically in this area here, and the Sweepbox lets them do that because there's no way for the attackers to get past it if there's a wall in the way. And what this does is it prevents attackers from riding the wall on the defense, going for cuts, and just generally getting space and being aggressive. So knowing that this is something that the sweepers want to set up, disrupting it is a very important goal. And you'll see here, one of my teammates, because there was some shenanigans with sealing in the center of the round, has been able to get up and disrupt the Sweepbox. Now, if we rewind the clip just a tad bit, you'll notice that when I'm coming in, I may not be aware of the initial seal. I also make space for my teammate there by turning left, because I saw them riding behind me. But I'm currently colting on the outside, keeping myself alive, looking for opportunities. Now, the moment I notice that the sweep has been broken, you can see me immediately turn towards the zone and get ready to cut off this sweeper from reforming their side of the box. Now, this is something you want to be looking out for, these gaps in their tail. If they're competent, the sweepers will not have gaps, or they'll have very small gaps. But sometimes things happen, and there's a center attack, or there's issues with sealing in the center. And this gap was created because my teammate ended up getting in and breaking the Sweepbox. So as soon as I see this, I'm positioning myself to go ahead and take up space on the side of the defense, stab the enemy sweeper out, and get past their first layer of defense, which is this Sweepbox. And you'll see this is exactly what happens. Right? I've now stabbed out the enemy sweeper. They're gone over in this direction. And now I have all of this space to myself. I want to note that the enemy sweeper's tail is still here, so I'm not directly pressuring the defense yet. But this will clear. This is on its way out, basically. So I am now in a very good spot because I have all of this space to work with to pressure the defense once the tail clears out. And if you'll notice, the enemy sweeper recognizes this as well. So they're heading in this direction. Now in the game, this is something that past me missed, and this is very important, and past me pays for this very, very dearly. And you'll see why in a couple seconds. So I'm just going to let the clip play. Now, that was a brilliant move by the enemy sweeper here. What they essentially did was, because I did not notice them come back through the front, they came in and put a wall between me and the defense. So what this does is that as long as their tail is here, I cannot come up to the defense and ride the wall, because there is this sweeper tail in the way. And because of that, even though I have all of this space on the side, I cannot pressure the defense without waiting 10 to 15 seconds for this tail to clear. On top of that, by leaving this space here, when the defense comes around, if they wish to expand, they can hop out of their tail and use all of this to expand, because they have a little wall which is blocking me from threatening them if they try to do that otherwise. So that also helps relieve pressure off of the defense as well. So this is quite a bad situation now, where I still have space on the side, but I'm unable to pressure the actual defense and shrink them. And on top of that, the defense actually can expand if it wants to. So this was a mistake and very bad. Now let me show you how to correct this. All right, so we're here now. Here's the enemy sweeper. Oh, here's the enemy sweeper. So here's the enemy sweeper, right? And I can already see that they're committing to this side. Now, their main exit is right here. They can, of course, turn back and live in their own maze. But their main exit is here. Now, if past me would have recognized that this sweeper was coming in and saw this, then it is very simple that past me could have came up here and redrew this shape. And there's basically very little this enemy sweeper can do to prevent this. They basically have to turn back at that point. And now I've got all of this space right here. I do want to note that this tail is clearing out. So there may be instances where you want to come in here and just be tempted, oh, I'll just redraw this shape, right? Now, I would be very hesitant to just redraw this shape with this tail in the way. I would probably choose to instead hang out, at least until the tail clears, and sort of contest and wait and see what this enemy sweeper does. The reason why is because this enemy sweeper can come in, stab underneath this tail, and just ride it out as it goes along. Now, this is very risky because they have to have the foresight and knowledge to understand how much this has been stabbed and how much this has been stabbed and whether it clear out and whether they can survive. But in this case, since it's very tight stabs here and here, they probably would not be able to do so. So just doing this could work. But if that was not the case, and this was like a little looser, let's say drawn just around the outside of the box and maybe a light stab there, right? Then they could come on the inside and do the exact same thing, just block you off of the defense. So why do I say all this? Because ideally, if you want to get on the back here, completely stab them off and make sure your own line is there, and then give yourself space to work on this segment if that's the segment you're focusing on. That is basically how you correct this play instead of simply letting the sweeper come in and block you off, like what happened here. Now, this forms basically the basis of how I like to play the game currently, and how, as a new player, you can be effective against more pros, and that is pressure. So you'll notice right here, past me turns back, right? I think, actually this is a better example. So right here, I turn in and then I turn out. You'll notice that right here in the corner, the enemy sweeper was also forced to turn out, right? And I also left a little bit of space as an exit for myself. This is something that, as I grew with time, I learned to do more, leave myself a little exit, so that in case this area doesn't work out, I can simply turn around and go through the exit and have space there. However, this can also be exploited by the enemies and is very context dependent, so I'm not too certain about recommending it, but it's just something to know. Now, what is this concept of pressure? If you can force your enemy to do something, then they are more likely to make a mistake. It's really as simple as that. So, because we came together and I forced them to turn away, they are more likely to misbind and mess up just because we both turned away. This also is a double-edged sword. You're more likely to mess up and misbind if you yourself are under pressure. The difference is that you want to be the one to force the other person as much as possible to bind in reaction to you, and you do not want to bind in reaction to them. That is the basic premise of pressure. And I want to talk about the concepts of space as well. You'll notice I'm keeping enough space for myself here and for others. Actually, I go out too far here. This is another thing. I want to be, like, when the defense was here, I want to be right here, like in this area, so that they cannot take care of all of this very hard to bind stuff they have created. But past me went out too far, and you'll notice the defense, if they wanted to, could actually clean it up, right? Because I would not be able to catch up here. However, I have speed, which is probably why they were a little more cautious about doing so. Now, there's one more thing I want to touch up on, or actually two more things. One is a good example coming up in a bit, where you can see me just binding. And here, there's a technique you can use where you gather speed. Now, this is typically done by drawing a large line and then following it back, and there's all sorts of variations. There's spirals, there's shapes you can do to make your initial grind a little bit faster, or gather a little more speed, but this is the simplest form. Riding a line and gathering a ton of speed. Now, you see here, past me did it at a pretty bad time because this allowed... You can see past me did it here at a pretty bad time because this allowed the enemy sweeper to basically come in and provide a tail of defense for the defense, which was starting to get pretty messy if you look at all of these hard to bind around structures. And now, current me, because they were gathering speed out here and not pressuring the defense will very quickly be able to expand, and you'll see this in a second here. The defense is able to just clean up, and because past me misplayed a little bit, they're able to basically fully expand the defense back out and get rid of all of the shapes. And there, as well, you just saw a good use of speed. of gathering speed. So if you'll notice, this enemy sweeper is going to come out here, is going to use this tail my teammate left, grind it, and then turn back around. Not this early. That's going to be, realistically, that's probably going to be somewhere around here. But if you'll notice, they're able to, sorry about that, hold on. They're able to use that speed to go ahead and surprise me because I'm busy focusing on the defense and dump me. So, yep, you can see them coming in, and I die. And that's something you can use as well to be effective, especially if you pretend that you're leaving and then coming back. It tends to catch people even who are expecting it off guard just because they might be busy or focused on something else. And especially if they're new or aren't paying attention, it's a good strat. Titchy. Now there is this moment right here where I'm going to point out another mistake Past Me makes. Here, after getting boxed off by Crinkle, I still have all of this space right here, right? But what Past Me decides to do, and this is a mistake, is grind a little bit on Crinkle's tail and then go back out. Now, if anything, this is probably the single biggest thing that Past Me was struggling with, and changing this since has improved my gameplay immensely. So, I'll give it to you here. If you notice, currently, what is the space I can influence? Well, I could bind in here, I could turn left, I could go in, and then I could have control over this segment. Cool. Does that really do anything for me? Well, not really, because I'd be trapping myself behind my own tail going in here. So that doesn't really do anything for me. In terms of where I can quickly reach, I can probably reach this area. And aside from that, there's not much else useful I can reach, which helps me pressure the defense. And you'll notice as well the enemy sweeper is doing a very good job of blocking me off completely from just going around their tail. So that is very well done by them. But if you notice, I am currently facing away from the defense, and even though I have all of this space and I control all of this portion, I'm not actually able to put myself in a position to pressure the defense or do anything useful. And this is because I'm orienting myself away from the defense. This is probably the biggest mistake I've seen myself make, I've seen other new players make, and it's just, you have no pressure while doing this. The enemy defense can expand, the sweepers can even go and leave if they want. If you keep on orienting yourself outwards, it is very much a tool to stay alive if you're not comfortable with binding, but you also are not able to properly pressure or attack the defense. So, again, Past Me turns back because I know... Past Me turns back because I know the tail is going to be clearing out this way, right? And that's where the enemy sweeper's tail is going to be clearing out. It's going to come out this way, right? So that's my fastest avenue of getting back into the action after being basically blocked out. But if you notice, what's in the way? There's all of this binding garbage Past Me had in the past, which is sitting here in my way. So if I wanted to go ahead and bind and be prepared to take this entrance into the zone, there is all of this stuff that Past Me is bound, which is making it incredibly hard and incredibly restricting, and it also limits my ability to enter into only this point. That is very, very bad. That makes you very predictable. This sweeper knows exactly where I'm going to enter from and can counter it very easily. Granted, they're a little far away, so they might not be able to get there in time, but you'll notice, as well that past me is very slow getting here. That's probably another bad thing. They turned out too far. The tail's already gone, but I'm not here. I'm not contesting it already. I'm still going to it. And that's something I'm still learning even to this day, is being a little faster with being on time to things. It's very, very important. You know, a second is the difference between making a very good play and cutting someone as opposed to being late and having your entire defense collapsing. So, you notice it works out in this case because the enemy sweeper is not here to contest and they chose to go on this side, which is fine, right? Because they're choosing to take care of this and this area as opposed to this one and this one, which is probably actually correct, though I'm not too sure. And you'll see in this case, I block the sweeper out and I choose to stay sides, but look at how much more aggressive I am in this scenario, right? I'm keeping myself oriented towards the defense, and I have always avenues where I can turn back, I can go here, I can head this direction. I'm not cut off. At the same time, I can always at any point choose to ride the defense and tighten them. And if I want to, I can go for a cut as well at any time. And that is the basic premise of a winger. Get in there, take up space, be annoying, don't let the sweepers have the space they want. But then also constantly orient yourself towards the zone and give yourself options to pressure, to maneuver, and also to cut people. Now, considering actual cutting and dueling is probably one of the worst parts of my kit, I tend to like to play from a very pressure-focused standpoint. So I'm typically going to be controlling space. I'm going to be owning zones, but I'm probably not going to be doing any sort of crazy moves to duel someone out of their own space or to tunnel under and try to fight them and actually physically cut them, because it is very, very risky. And if you're against a more experienced player, they will win a lot of the time. Now, there's an argument to be made to do it anyway to learn, and I highly encourage trying new things and learning new things, but just keep in mind, it may be frustrating, it may be tiring. This is what I found to be effective for me when I'm playing winger. And, of course, what to think about when I'm playing winger as well. So, right here, I do also want to note, I don't know if I've already said this before, I think I have, but I'll just quickly note again, past me went out too far. I definitely wanted to be a little bit closer in case the defense decided to clean up this mess. In any event, that's about most of the clip. I'll let the entire round play out from the very start and let you see it in real time from the very beginning, how it looks like. And I do also want to mention that as a new player as well, you don't have to think about nearly all these things. Just getting familiar with the game, getting comfortable. But if you do want to start thinking about more things, thinking about how you could do better, this is just a couple of the things I'm thinking about when I'm going on the offensive or adapting to the situation as a winger. So. Also, I've noticed that my camera work is a little bit worse here. I'm not glancing as much, so not able to see as much. But if you glance, you also it's also harder to bind, so there's the trade-off there. There's the leaving space I was talking about. Again, just constantly orienting yourself, making sure you're ready and active. Unlike what is currently here, this is where I made a mistake of letting the enemy sweep get by me and basically allow the defense to reset. Again, another misplay here, go out too far, defense fully expands. And here, not prepared for the speed, get cut. I hope that was useful to you all. I hope that some of you found something of value from it. I've got a couple of projects in the works, and hopefully they'll be a bit more digestible, a bit more cohesive, maybe even a bit more funny, dare I say, but I'll leave it off with this. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.